All right, I'll tell you when we're live. My phone will show it. It's very exciting. All right, and we are live. This is so cool. Yes. Hello, everybody. We are so excited. Sorry for my face being orange. I don't know what's happened to the lighting, but let's just say it's sunset. So I'm Jamila. I'm the youth coordinator at Ryde-Gladesville Parish. And we want to shout out tonight who is there. We already have Frank Laurier here with us online. This person got to us very early, so welcome. We have new subscribers as well. You guys are awesome. We are here to really bring you the truth and just be honest and open in this genuine setting of our Thursday Night Lives. It's been such a great success so far. So please let us know who's online. We know there's a 19-second delay. So as we go, I will introduce, I'll get the speakers above us to introduce themselves. Actually, I think you guys are beside me on the right.
Oh, yeah.
So it's a bit different, isn't it? So can you guys introduce yourselves and what you do for your awesome ministry?
Yeah, so my name is Simon Carrington, and this is my beautiful wife,
I'm
Madeleine Carrington, and we're the founders of Fire Up Ministries, which is a small ministry based in Sydney, Australia, and we're very blessed to be able to speak about the messages of life and love and marriage and what God's plan for our sexuality is. We've been doing that for the last 3 years full time, and 8 years overall. Yeah,
even before we met each other.
That's right.
Awesome. That's fantastic. Yeah, I've seen some of you guys speak. I've seen when you guys were dating and then also when you've been married. So it's been awesome to be able to continue this journey with you and have you guys share and speak. It's fantastic. So have we got any more shout outs? Come on, guys. So I can see 10 people online. Who's there? Just give Maddie and Simon a high five. Give them a like. That's the high five. Please share this as well because this is important. So who else is online? And we have our Good Thief Photography. Are you there? Did you make it home yet? Maybe while we're waiting, we might do a little icebreaker, as I like to do every week. So what the icebreaker question is this week is, what is your favorite meal to cook? So I think we might start with the married couple. Simon, do you cook sometimes?
Yeah, I don't cook like great meals, but I can certainly feed myself. I can cook eggs and bacon and meat on our barbecue. That's probably the best. Yeah, for me, it's probably like my barbecues are pretty good.
Fantastic. What about you, Maddie? What's your
my favorite meal to cook? Would have to be.
She's a very good cook.
I love steak and ale pies in winter.
Oh, that sounds so good.
Yeah.
Anything with the slow cooker. I love the slow cooker.
Yes, saves so much time.
And warms the house and just cooks all day. It's great.
You can smell it. I'll come home from work and it drives me crazy till I get to get into it. It's so good though.
Fantastic. I wonder what you guys like to cook at home. Maybe put it on the chat as well. So we still haven't had any shout outs. Guys, what's happening? Where are you all? So as our Thursday Night Live works, we usually have a set of questions and answers, or we have a talk or something like that, and then we have opportunity for questions. So throughout the time we have this sharing from Maddie and Simon. If you'd like to ask them a question, if you're married, if you're not, about married life or something that comes up through the discussion, please feel free to ask the questions, and I'll kind of slot them in and make sure that they're answered. This is your opportunity, this free opportunity to be able to ask those questions. So it's really exciting. So please, guys, give us a thumbs up if you're online in the chat below. We'd love to see you, to see who's around. So I might just I'm gonna challenge Fire Up Ministries 2 minutes to share their pre-marriage story. How did you guys meet?
Okay.
And how did you obviously quickly meet, date, get married? What was that like?
The whole thing in 2 minutes.
Well,
First time we met.
We both love to talk, but I probably got a better chance of doing it in 2 minutes.
Yeah, so you better do it.
All right, so we met. We first encountered each other at Eyewitness in 2012.
Yes.
Yeah, but we didn't really speak too much. But that's where we first crossed paths, and it wasn't until the following January or November, November or January, that we met at in Sydney at a Theology of the Body 2-day course, and that's where we first spoke.
I heard her. She gave an answer to this question that the priest asked, and I remember thinking to myself, what an incredible response! I need to go and meet this girl because this is something that I was passionate about. And she gave her answer was so passionate and full of zeal. So I went over and spoke to a friend that I knew that was speaking to her as my little way in to go and meet her. And then from then on, I was hooked.
Yeah, but then I was doing a year of mission in America. So I'd gone back to America. And then when I came home, I was working on giving chastity talks here in Sydney and trying to set up a ministry, and I had a number of people tell me, oh, you should get in touch with this guy called Simon Carrington because he gives chastity talks as well. And I was like, oh, I have to meet him then. And now I don't know many young men giving chastity talks around here, so I called Simon and we met up to have to share a meal and discuss what our individual missions were and how we could help each other. And a few months later, we discerned that we wanted to start dating and entered a courtship, and here we are.
It was within an hour, about 45 minutes of me having dinner with Madeleine. That first night, I was like, I think this is the girl I'm going to marry. I was like, I'm having dinner with my wife here, and did not take long at all. She was amazing.
Aww. And that was definitely less than 2 minutes. Wow, that was good.
Oh, good.
Awesome. Yeah, and we've had a few more call outs as well. Marcus and Schneha and Mario and Good Thief Photography. I don't know who that is, but we know him especially.
Awesome.
All saying hi, which is awesome. No, and that's really cool that you guys really discerned it. And look where this journey has brought you. And now look at the adventures you've had and the many adventures to come, which is so cool. And I think this is a good context to now get into the really like the topic tonight, which is modern day marriage. And we've been exploring different modern day topics. But I think sort of that was kind of like the first kind of few questions. But what I'd like to ask you is like you guys have, you've had the dating experience, you've given the talks about dating and things like that. But now that you're married, like, what was it like actually moving in together after the marriage? Like, what are some of the challenges you've faced? The quirks and the unexpected things that you're like, oh man, I didn't see that about that person. But also the unexpected joys that have come from this experience so far.
Yeah, I'll start. I think that the first thing that I think is this huge shock when you move in together is it is this clash of what you know to be your normal. So that the way that you've got your morning routine, you've got your evening routine, and then it doesn't take long for all that to kind of start coming out. And you realize that you just clash on what is normal to you and what's not normal to them. For example, probably like it's kind of funny, but every morning when I get changed out of what I go to bed to sleep and into what I'm wearing that day, I would always just leave my pajamas on the top of on my bed. I wouldn't kind of do anything with them, just kind of dump them on my pillow or on my bedside table. And after like 3 or 4 weeks, like I think she came up to me and she was like that I just that's driving me crazy. Can you just put your pajamas under your pillow so I don't have to see them, right? And I remember it was like we were still in our honeymoon, and it was like 3 weeks into our marriage, and I was like, oh, I'm sorry, like is that kind of get on your nerves? And she was like, that's been driving me nuts for 3 weeks. Like, please put your pajamas under the pillow. And so I think, and that's just one example of so many little things that
we had another simple one was where to keep the butter. Because at Simon's family, they keep the butter.
It's always in the pantry. In the
pantry. So it's soft and ready to go. But my family always kept the butter in the fridge. And so we had to make this big decision of, well, where are we going to keep our butter?
So I'll grab the butter, make my toast and put it in the pantry. And then she's looking for it in the fridge. And then she'd say, where'd you put the butter? And you go to the pantry. And then, so we keep putting it back until we worked out. And obviously I was the one that let her have it where she'd like it. Yeah, so now our butter's in the fridge.
But it's so many things like that you don't realize that if you don't have, they're little examples of meaningless things really. But if you don't have a spirit of humor and, willingness just to compromise on your normal and it's not about someone surrendering, what they want. It's about coming together, having a logical discussion about, and obviously they're little examples. There's a lot of bigger examples too, but having a meaningful discussion about it where you are respectful to one another and you decide on your new normal.
Yeah.
So.
And I think that they might sound like they don't mean anything, but when you stack like 10 little things that can cause frustration in the other person, then I think it is really important that you do know just how to talk about those things and come to your new normal. But it's actually really important that you don't just sweep things under the rug, and that you do bring them up and come to something. Even if the issue, like something like where are we going to put our butter or my pajamas. That's not sinful. It's got nothing to do with, it's not a question of is this moral or not, but it can still cause tension in the marriage if you're not.
And I think how you learn to deal with those smaller issues help build healthy habits for dealing with bigger issues that may come up.
Absolutely.
No, I think that's a really good example. We've had a comment here from Marcus. I just put myself back in gallery here. That it's beautiful to see such a young couple making the commitment to marriage in this modern day. You look around and it's just so uncommon. The values of the relationships have been lost.
All right, thanks, mate.
Yeah, I think it's so true. I think also that it's nice to hear that, you give talks and you share all the good stuff, but at the end of the day, like actually coming together is not as easy as it sounds. I was just talking to you guys earlier, but another married couple said to me earlier this week, they were like, I said, so how is it? And they're like, well, it's okay. It's not all the, it really begins like actually having someone around all the time is very challenging, but also very rewarding. What are some of the joys that you've had from like those situations and that have, the fruit that's come from that?
I think it's just been, well, you said, we were talking about this earlier. I'm just saying that one of the most beautiful things about getting married was not having to leave, when you say goodbye.
Yeah.
And it's like you're coming home to that person. And that's really special. I think
that was always tough, and still, to this day. I mean, I'm like when young couples ask for advice or help from me through email or phone calls, they'll often say, that the hardest part of any date is having to say goodbye. That's often when the struggles to stay pure can happen. Where people they're sitting in the car, or they're out the front house in the dark, whatever it might be, and that it's a point of struggle for them. So for me, I was like that was one of the biggest wins, was saying I can actually go in the same house now with my wife and experience that joy of having more time with her than ever before. And also, I mean, I think too, you know, we can talk about those little things that can cause a bit of frustration or whatever, but you know, we laugh so much at home. You know, when she'll make dinner, or if I'm helping with dinner, which is not as often as I'd like it to be, you know, we'll put music on and we dance and we'll sing and joke around and play with Joseph, and just spending that time together, you know, us two and then us three with Joseph, our son. That is just, it's invaluable. And that's the great joy of living together and being in the home, is you can just you create your own family culture that's full of affirmation and kind words and praising each other, and it's awesome.
That's the thing. It's like marriage. It takes a lot of work every single day, but it can be so full of joy when you are committed to creating the marriage or the family that you want. You know, so yeah, I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit as the interview progresses. But I also just wanted to say as well, with the joy is this, it's living for the other person, you know, and like we obviously, marriage is a vocation, and when you say your wedding vows, you're committing to doing everything that you can to help get that person to heaven, as well as trusting that this is your path to heaven. And so, you know, in that, there is so much sacrifice in that, obviously, because that comes with any vocation and suffering. But there's also a tremendous joy in living every single day for the sake of the other, and loving Christ primarily by loving that other person. So there's a lot of joy in that as well.
I also really like the fact that, like, if you have a fight, right, but if you were living together and not married and you didn't have that commitment, it would just be easy to up and leave. But you've got this commitment. You've made this commitment with your bodies, with, you know, before God, before your family. Why do you think it's so important in terms of this whole, you know, the American sort of formality of shacking up, as they say, but like moving in together? Why is it so important to wait to move in together till you get married? I think that's something, and for you, like, having done that, what was the difference, so that couples can see that?
Well, I think like a lot of people treat that, you know, moving in together as the trial run. You know, like I've even heard it compared to buying a car. You know, I have to take it for a test drive, and it's like, no, you don't. You're not buying a car. You're committing your life to someone, and you know, if you want to find out if you're compatible, you can look at that in one of two ways. Like, absolutely you're compatible because you're male and female, or absolutely you're not compatible because you're male and female. Like, you know, if you take that vow and you are committed to you know, loving that person, well then whether or not you live together before you're married is not going to change that commitment, if you know what I mean. You know, it's like, it's the act of the will to make that commitment, not, you know, whether or not you can live together without fighting. And if anyone can live together without fighting, please tell us the secret. It's not possible. Of course you're going to clash, but the important thing is that you learn how to work through those arguments in a respectful and loving way, you know. And so that, I think our culture just has that whole mentality wrong of, you know, you need to live with someone in order to know if you can commit to them. It's like, no, you commit to them and then you practice that, you know, you stay faithful to that vow. And I think, sorry, I know. Well, I think when you take that vow, right, because you think about it, marriage brings the most incredible, you know, it's not a commitment, it's not a contract, it's a covenant, it's an exchange of two lives, you know. And so you are not only giving yourself completely, but you are receiving the other completely. And that is, it's such a powerful thing. And if I can quote Kimberly Hahn, the wife of Scott Hahn, I heard her say in a talk once that if if you really knew what the marriage vows meant, you would never get married because it demands everything. But when we do that, when we make that, when we say those vows, with that comes the most unimaginable, unbelievable security that other person gives you to be completely loved, no matter what. And it allows you, like, if the relationship is healthy and it's centered on Christ and it's moving towards heaven, then it allows you to thrive and be the person that God has called you to be. And so that the commitment and the grace that we get from the sacrament, I think, is what allows couples to live together. And that's why it's, you should do it after you get married. It's and then you've got the whole physical chastity side of things too, which is
on that note, we have Good Thief Photography, Patrick, asking if there, in terms of this discussion, just pre-marriage, and then we'll get on to more like the daily life of marriage, but are there any discussions you recommend couples have before they get married? Example, questions about children, faith, premarital sex, etc. So what do you?
Yes to all three of those. I think that those are huge ones. And I've met young women especially that will come up to me and say, look, I'm engaged, or I've been in a relationship with this guy for a year or so, but I still have no idea where he stands on things like children, or whether he'd want to use contraception in our marriage. Or she might say, hey, we still haven't even made we haven't made a concrete promise yet, or I don't even know if we're absolutely going to save sex for marriage yet. He kind of keeps hinting it here and there, and I just keep saying, well, I don't feel ready. But it's like, honestly, that is one of the easiest ways to add the most unnecessary pain and confusion into your relationship. We got all that stuff out of the way first date, like straight away on the table. And because I knew, I mean, I was a virgin when I got married, and so was Madeleine. And I remember on our first date, I said, look, this is my boundaries with purity. I'm a virgin now, and I intend and absolutely will be a virgin on the day that I get married. And so that's something that is a value to me, and I need to know, where you stand on that. And not only did she say, yes, that's great, and I want that for you as well, but she also wanted that for herself. And so it wasn't about simply, because there's a lot of couples that will say, look, he or she might not respect or understand, he might not share my value. Like one of the couples might say, I want to save sex for marriage, but, you don't, but I need you to respect that I want to. What I always say is, well, in that moment, when that couple has a weak day, so that girl that might have said, I want to save sex for marriage, but the guy doesn't want to save sex for marriage. If she's having a weak night, right, she's feeling weak and vulnerable, then, rather than him being strong for her and actually guarding that promise that she wants to keep for herself, then he's going to try and wear her down on a night when she's feeling weak. When she needs him to be her man and guard and protect her, he's going to probably likely take advantage of her. And that is why it's so crucial that not only, firstly, are you talking about issues like children, boundaries with purity, and what aspect the faith is going to play in your marriage. It's not, and this might upset a few people, but it's not good enough to simply for her just to tolerate my values. It's not good enough for Madeleine just to respect that I want to do something. She needs to want that value for me and for herself as well. So yes to all those three things. And honestly, if you can't talk about issues like premarital sex, or whether you're going to save sex for marriage or not, if you can't talk about children or the impact that faith would have on your marriage on the first date, then my question to you would be, then what on earth is the point of that date? Because the point of dating is to discern marriage, not just to get to know somebody and for them to make you laugh. Because if that's all that a date is, then that's a pretty sad date, in my opinion. A date needs to have meaning and be packed with that, with that very much of an attitude of, we are here to discern marriage, so let's talk about the things that matter if we get married. I hope that was clear enough.
Yes. It's very good to be intentional and really know where you're going, because you also not end up using the other person as well, because you're not just toying with their emotions, you're not objectifying it, you're not looking for a good time or a good friend or whatever. You're just, you really know, this is my goal. And I think goals are probably really important. In terms of on that note, but along those lines, but in terms of communication, as you said, communicating that at the beginning is very important, because you're also not just thinking about the other, you're thinking about your future children, because I think that's a really important thing. In terms of communication in your marriage, how do you guys, like Maddie, what really irritates you about like sometimes communication with guys? Only because I think it's really interesting to see from both sides. And then how do you guys really bring that together and balance that out? So, and Simon, what irritates you about sort of like the girl side of it, the female side of it, and sort of what can both kind of men and women be aware of when they communicate with each other, with the opposite sex, and then bring that to marriage? And how do you guys work that out?
I think something to consider is that men and women think very differently, and we often process our emotions very differently as well. So, and this is very generalized and it's very sort of stereotypical, but if we understand the male I guess emotions which impact the way they communicate, is it's very sort of compartmentalized, and very much focused on one thing at a time, whereas women tend to be more, everything's more connected and it's more fluid, and it's just harder to sort of separate things. And so
I talk about one thing at a time.
Yeah, and so
I'll pull out a box.
We'll be talking about something and pretty, might be serious, or we're having an intense discussion about something, and then I'll remember that it's bin night. And he's like, wait, what? So it's trying to learn to be respectful about the way other people think, and understanding that is God's design for man and woman, and that trying to enter into the other is important, entering into the emotions and the way that we think, because obviously the way we think and then we express it, that's how we're communicating, and just with I just want to talk about technology for a second, particularly with dating. We speak to a lot of young couples, and what we're finding is there's an increasing amount of young people who will say, and it could be anyone really, who will say, "Oh, I've got nothing to talk about at night to my my beloved, my wife, my girlfriend, whatever, my boyfriend." It's like, okay, well, the first question we ask is, well, do you text them during the day? And they're like, oh yeah, we text nonstop. And it's like, well, that's why you've got nothing to talk about, because you've already said everything that you wanted to say throughout the day, So we never ever texted like throughout the day. And we always wanted to share that exciting news in person, or just share about the day in person. And that has really helped build good communication, I think. But do you want to share about like intentional?
I think for and look, you already kind of shared it, and I think, look, men. Okay, for all the ladies that are tuning into this now, men just like it straight. Don't give us don't share something that we've got to kind of read between the lines to work out what you really want to say or want us to think. So oftentimes, you might have an idea of something that you'd like to do on the weekend after mass or something, right? And rather than just saying, Simon, I would love to go here after Mass, or can we do this, this, and this? She might say, oh, look, have you got any plans for after Mass? And I'll be like, no, why? Like, is there something that you wanted to do? And then she'll go, she might throw out 3 or 4 options of things that we could do. And I'm like, okay, so you've just fired off 4 options at me that we could do, but is there actually one, Madeleine, that you would like to do? And she'll go, yes, there is. Right? And it's like, it would have been a lot easier if right from the start you just said, hey, Simon, unless you've got an issue with this, can we do X, right?
Yeah.
Nice and simple, straight to the point.
I'm working on that.
Because there's times, honestly, I'm like, hey, Maddie, I have no idea what you want to do or what you even want me to say. That, like, I got no idea. So just honestly, just do us a favor. And I think for all women, I suppose, and I would say, it's, don't be afraid to state what you're really thinking. Don't be afraid to just tell your husband, your boyfriend, what it is that you want. If it's something that really means something to you, because we would much prefer just to hear exactly what is actually going on in your mind than us trying to journey through what we think you might mean, because that just kind of sends me in a spin.
So true. As a woman, I'm like, yeah, nailed it.
How we think.
Yeah. And I know, and you've said, it comes from a place of maybe not wanting to impose what you want to do on our evening or whatever. But I think it's for wives, maybe that are tuning into this, or for girlfriends tuning in. It's, if your husband really loves you, if your boyfriend really loves you, then he wants to know what your ideal situation would be, so that as much as possible he can help fulfill that. It's not about being nervous to state what you would love, but trust that we want to give you the good gift that you do want. Does that make sense?
Yes, very well said.
Be
Yes.
bold and say it, because I'd love to fulfill wherever you want to go after Mass.
I'm glad you were able to resolve that. In terms of faith, now you're talking about going to Mass together. How do you actually bring faith into your marriage? What are some tips for couples as well, and for those who are discerning marriage?
Okay,
well,
I think, sorry.
Yeah.
The first would definitely be prayer. Now, it's really important that you both the husband and the wife, have their own personal prayer life, but that also
crucial.
Pray together.
Yes.
It's not you get married and you throw your prayer life out the window and just, only pray with that person, but that you are praying individually, but then praying together.
That is so important.
Yeah, but one thing for us throughout our marriage has been, like, we have a real desire to pray the Holy Rosary together every single day, and sometimes it doesn't happen, but we notice a massive difference in our relationship, just in the general peace of our home, when we are praying the Rosary consistently together every single night. It has a huge impact on our marriage, and that it really anchors us at the end of the day together. But also to something that, and we've been on a journey with this, because it wasn't easy for both of us to start, praying from the heart in front of the other to our Lord. But that has been such a form of spiritual and emotional intimacy, because you think about how, intimate is, to be intimate with someone is to really, the core of intimacy is getting to the heart of the person, like really seeing the gift that the person is. And so there's really, on an emotional or spiritual level, nothing more intimate than hearing the other person open up their heart to God, and so that has, as when we do that, that is such a form of bringing Christ into the center of our marriage, which is where he belongs. And so that's, the prayer is really big for us, but it's just other, like, just simple things like having sacramentals around the home. Simon's really good at blessing Joseph and I with holy water every day, and just flooding the home with religious images and things that kind of keep you centered throughout the day as well. Like we've got an image of Our Lady in Joseph's room, and so every night we say, "Where's Mama Mary?" and he points to her, and he's going to be 1 in 2 weeks. So like there's ways to bring the faith even to a baby, that can, if it's intentionally put in the home, I guess.
Yeah.
Sorry, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, just one quick point. I think it's really important too. So when Madeleine was saying the importance of having an individual prayer life. So one really, really important and powerful aspect of having an individual prayer life is to intercede for your spouse. So it's one thing, and it's so beautiful to pray with your spouse, and whether it's vocal prayers like the rosary or saying a novena. That's one thing as well that I've really loved doing, is we'll say, right, this is intention, and it kind of helps us make sure we're doing 9 days in a row of prayer together as a married couple, for saying novenas together. But it's really in my own individual prayer time to intercede for Madeleine and her needs, to intercede for Joseph and pray for my son and for his growth and holiness in the faith. Because when you're praying for your spouse, what I've found is that you're a lot more in tune. I mean, with that passage from Matthew's gospel about, take the log out of your own eye before you try and take the speck out of your neighbor's eye. And I think as a married couple, we often see the faults in our spouse much easier than we see in ourselves. And we're very quick to blame or to point out what they could be doing better. That's a struggle I have. I can certainly nitpick it at her. And then in my own prayer, when I'm interceding for her and praying about her, sometimes the Lord, and he just did that recently, he just revealed that, there's many things in my life that I'm not doing well. I've got to remove the log out of my eye before I start trying to take the speck out of hers. So praying for your spouse as well, it helps you to become a better spouse for them, but you're also more sensitive to what they're going through. So if I know that she's having a rough time at work at the moment, or she's struggling, with Joseph, or she had a hard day with Joseph, then I can take that stuff to prayer, and that will motivate me to perhaps try and serve more around the home, around dinner, support with dinner, bath Joseph, or so it makes you more aware of how your spouse may need you or need help. Because if you're not praying for your spouse every day, know that the devil wants your spouse's soul. He's coming for her, or he's coming for him. He wants to destroy their relationship with God. So you need to be that shield of faith, as it says in Ephesians 6, right? The shield of faith to protect your spouse from the flaming darts of the enemy.
That's so good. It's so true. And especially like this idea of empathy, like really empathy would be so important in a relationship, because it can become all about you as well, very easily. And this, I know that there's been articles that have been talking about that unmet expectations are a killer of marriage, because you can really have, this is the idea that I want it to be, and I expect this other person to meet these sort of standards. But definitely having Christ at the center. I mean, for example, being a single person, but also just being in a household of other girls. Whereas, if I didn't go to Jesus, I would be taking all my problems to them and putting all of it on them. And really not being able to be, as you said, Simon, aware of the other, aware of where they're coming from, and really being able to, because, you know, it, in a way that's also very sacrificial too, really helps you to get outside of your own self, and it still allows you the space to be able to say, hey, actually I'm struggling with this too. But just to be aware that there's another person in this relationship rather than just yourself. Yeah. And obviously the devil wants to attack marriage. It's the foundation of society, so I can see that that's so important. Yeah.
Yep.
So important. In terms of like vulnerability with each other, like, is that tough, you know, to be vulnerable when, you know, you're struggling with things? And what are some ways that you kind of have had those, you know, vulnerable conversations about what you're going through, and why is it important, do you think, for married couples to be vulnerable?
Well, huge.
Okay, so vulnerability, is it hard? Yes and no. So the reason I say yes is because, you know, if you want to learn how selfish you are, get married. And if you really want to learn how selfish you are, have a baby. Because your time is not your own, and it all, you know, you just realize, wow, like I really don't know much about sacrificial love, you know, until the rubber hits the road and you've got this newborn that is completely dependent on you. But rewind a little bit to getting married, and it's like, wow, like I am called to love this person every single day, even if it doesn't feel good, or even if I don't want, or even if I feel like it, like I have to rise above my desires there. And however, I forget my link to vulnerability. What was I going to say? Oh yeah, so you realize how selfish you are. So marriage acts as, you know, I like to imagine that marriage is a mirror. You know, you see that you cannot hide yourself. We spend so much time and effort in our day-to-day life, especially in our singleness, presenting whoever we want to present in ourselves. You know, like
masks.
Yeah.
Masks on.
Like you cannot fake it in marriage. You cannot hide who you truly are. You cannot hide your faults anymore, or your weaknesses. You know, they're completely on display for your spouse. And so vulnerability is almost, it's inevitable, but I think a lot of people fight it in marriage, and they still try and hide what's really, really going on. And a lot of that, I think, stems from a fear of, hang on, if someone really knew what was going on in here, they wouldn't love me. You know, and going back to what we were saying earlier about the security that the marriage vow brings, that's why vulnerability, the other answer to my question, is that it is, you know, it is easy because you're able to just completely bare yourself to your spouse, trusting that they're going to love you and meet you in that. You know, like think about your spouse as, you know, like imagine yourself as the woman at the well, and your spouse is Jesus, just meeting you with whatever is going on, you know, and they're there, they're loving you, because, you know, we are called to be Christ to one another in marriage, to bring Christ to the other, and so to love as Christ. And, you know, there have been times in our marriage where it's been difficult to love as I'm called to love, whether it's my own failings or whether, you know, Simon's hurt me with something. But that's where you call upon the sacramental grace and you say, you know, Christ, like I am failing to love Simon as I'm called to love, so please love him through me, you know, like do the loving for me. And that's where you see the grace just flood in, when you actually, like, sometimes I think my most important role as a wife is to get out of the way and let Christ love Simon through me, you know, like, but it's all, and all that's wrapped with vulnerability. And yeah, so it's both difficult and not difficult, but I would say that, you know, if you just give into, like, if you just allow yourself to be loved by your spouse, then you want to be vulnerable, you know, because you're truly loved in that. And that's powerful.
Yeah. I mean, my point on that, which that's really good. I think you will only be as vulnerable in your marriage as what your partner will allow you to be.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is that it only takes one time for you to get burnt and for walls to go up and withdraw and shut your spouse out in an emotional way. So if there's something that's on my mind, my heart, it's bugging me, and I'm feeling shame and I'm embarrassed about something that's going on in my life. I don't really want to tell Maddie because I'm embarrassed about it, but I know I should bring it up with her. And say I bring it up, she's very good. I'm not just using it as an example, but if I bring up something and I say, look, I've been praying and I discovered that there's this about me, and I'm really embarrassed about this struggle I'm going through. Now she has two options. She can meet me there with mercy and express profound love. If maybe it's something I've done wrong toward her, she can forgive me. So I forgive you for that. Thank you for sharing that with me. I love you I love you unconditionally. And what that does is that makes me feel loved, and our level of intimacy and trust will actually grow and deepen to a level that far superior than what it was before I opened up. However, if I unpack something, if I'm share something vulnerable to me, that is quite difficult to share with Madeleine, and she turns around and says, either she's disinterested and indifferent, and says, oh well, I don't really care, or she doesn't really listen to me when I'm sharing it, I will immediately know, you know what, this is not a safe zone to bear my heart, because it takes a lot of courage to be vulnerable and bear your heart. And if it's not listened to and received with love and appreciation and with intentionality, the other spouse will learn there's no point sharing anymore. I wasn't respected in my vulnerability. Or she could even come out and actually crush me even more. She could spit on me and stamp on me and say, I can't believe you would do that, or I can't believe that's what you're struggling with, like what's wrong with you, etc. Right? If that happens, you can forget any chance of vulnerability coming out again. And what I'm starting to see or notice in especially young couples that I'll talk to and meet is that it's very easy, even in the early years of marriage, to get burnt in this area of vulnerability. And what happens is it's almost like an emotional divorce takes place, where the couple move from lovers to friends because they're not really sharing what's most passionate to them anymore. And then eventually, when you keep stacking these years, months, whatever it is, of not feeling comfortable to be vulnerable, you can even move from friends to roommates, people that simply they coexist in the home, but there's no real level of intimacy and passion and love. And so really, if a couple will get a divorce in 15 or 20 years, chances are that their heart died to the other very, very early in their marriage, and they've been sticking it out for the vow's sake, but it's not overflowing from a sincere love and joy for the other. Yeah, I think vulnerability is super important. Yeah. But when it's more important to foster vulnerability, how the vulnerable person is received. So the more that if I'm received with greater love, I'm going to share greater. If I'm knocked down, walls are going to start going up. So vulnerability, very important, but it's all dependent on the other person.
And I think it's like important then to also like of your part, right? I know it's hard to then come back and to feel like, oh my gosh, like I can't trust this person. But I would encourage that person to then communicate that, because if you don't communicate that, that's an unmet expectation as well, because you're kind of putting this bar, oh, I expected this person to be there. But if they didn't realize in that moment that maybe they were being indifferent to a situation because that, they've had a bad day, blah, blah, blah. They weren't being able to be present. It's really being present to that person. And that's loving your neighbor. It would just make sense to as encouragement from my amazing mum, as she would always say, just be real. Just go to them and say, you know what? I actually found it really hard to share with you because, you have this wall up. I have similar conversation. I know it's not married life for me, but similar conversation with my sister. My mum says, stop coming to me and telling me what you're struggling with. Go to that person, tell them. So I was real with her, and she was like, oh, wow, I can't believe that I didn't even see that, because that's the problem. We're afraid to be real. And if that person
That's a really good point. Thank
Yeah.
you. That I could have added that.
Yeah.
Certainly, yeah. If you feel that way, to follow it up, that's a really good point. Thank you, Jamil.
Yeah, because it comes with like responsibility as individuals as well. Like, I think also responsibility, like taking responsibility is really a part of, like actually listening. And it's really hard because you have to be humble. You have to hear the hard stuff. Man, I didn't put the dishes away again. And having consequences for that, and that you both agree
Yes.
with, treating each other as equals,
Amen.
Yeah.
Fantastic point. Thank you for adding that. That's really good.
So much lesson learned with living with housemates too. So I'm being prepared for the marriage.
Awesome.
Great learning.
Yeah, for sure. I just want to now, like, you're actually not just married couples now. You're parents. Congratulations.
Thank you.
It's so exciting. Now, parenting is a whole different, topic. But I thought we'd just touch on it because I don't think it's really, as I said to you guys before, it's not really talked about. I just want to quickly note, if anybody has any questions that are coming up for them, please write them in the chat now. This is your opportunity. We've got maybe 8 to 10 minutes left. So please, I encourage you. So in terms of this, this beautiful joy of being able to have little Joseph, now you have a new responsibility. So what are some of the important foundations that you'll make for yourselves and your son to help him and your relationship? Like, I think sometimes we don't talk about the relationship, to continue to flourish, to continue to work together.
Sorry, the relationship between us with Joseph, or
yes, with you, Joseph, and each other, because now you've got a third person in the relationship.
And I think this is definitely, it's a great point, Jamil, and it's definitely an ongoing issue that starts, I think, at the beginning of marriage, because, when you're dating or, even preparing for marriage, you're the time that you spend together is so intentional, like you go on a date or you go out the day, or, if Simon would come to visit me, I wouldn't be doing a million things to get ready for the next day. I'd just be spending time with him. But the second you get married, we realized it very early in our marriage, like, oh my gosh, like we have, yes, we live together now, but we have just spent, all afternoon since we got home from work, just cooking and cleaning and, preparing, and, for you it was more reading or relaxing. I'm just kidding.
Relaxing.
But like, you have to be intentional in marriage. And so we, Simon is brilliant at initiating this, wanting to have intentional time together every single day, and whether that be a coffee as soon as he comes home from work, we sit down for 15-20 minutes and just touch base on the day, really, see how the other is going. That's a little harder now with Joseph. It sort of depends on his time. So he normally goes to bed at 6:30, and then we have our intentional time where we will have dinner together or just spend time together. But it's so important as married couples to make that intentional time for each other. So, bring a baby into the mix, and it's 10 times harder to get that intentional time. So, look, we have a weekly date night. So there's one night a week where we have our date night, and, a lot of that has been at home the last, with all the isolation. But if we have the opportunity, when isolation isn't on, we will see if, a family member can come over and just be here while Joseph's asleep, and we will go out for an hour or 2 hours, even just to get a Sunday from McDonald's, you know, to sit in the car park and talk, just to get out and just to have that intentional time together. And so, you know, that it's so important. To make that time.
I often say if it isn't scheduled, it won't get done. So if you're just hoping for a spare hour to show up somewhere, it's not going to happen, because there's always something to do. And unfortunately, we don't value we don't often value like building and furthering the intimacy with the person you're in a relationship with as something urgent and important. We never would put intimacy in the category of urgent, important things. There's always something that would seem more important in the moment. And so that's why it certainly is. It is important to have things booked in, but also to be scanning for times that you can carve out for each other. So when Joseph goes to sleep, he might give us an hour. There's like an hour window in the day somewhere, and I might say, "Hey, Maddie, you know what? We don't have to do the clothes. Like we don't have to touch the clothes right now. We don't have to, you know, prep dinner right now. Let's utilize this time now to sit down and to reconnect, to re-engage together." Also, you know, we're very blessed to live close to both our families. And so, you know, whether it's once a fortnight or once a month, we might book, you know, one of our mums to come over and watch Joey for 2 hours while we go out and grab a coffee or grab dinner or go for a walk or something. That's really special. So, lastly, I would say having and again, I'm not an expert at all. We're not experts at all. I don't want to pretend I know what I'm talking about here with parenting. I'm learning and learning and learning. But we have found that having Joseph in a routine has also been a huge win. So we know roughly to the hour when he's going to wake up. We know roughly to the hour, half an hour when he's going to go to bed. We know roughly when his sleep times are. And so when you know kind of what their routine is, it's much easier to then be intentional about your own scheduled time together. If the kids are if our child was going to bed whenever, that would make it much harder.
Yeah.
That's so good. And it's so good that, like, as you said, with the routine foundation, I think it's so important, because that also means you're putting him first, because he's the fruit of the love of both of you, but also then you're not forgetting that you need that foundation. And also, you know, it's if you really look at it in retrospect, there's also God in the midst of it. So he's the fourth person. I mean, he's the center, but also he's the fourth. So you've got four of you, you know, really together.
Yeah.
It's like a community. It's like a little Catholic community, you see. So
right.
Your own church, as they say.
And of course, when Joseph is up, when he's awake, we're trying to invest in him as much as we can. And so obviously that special time, you know, would be between us as well, playing with him, interacting with him. He's always doing something funny or something we want to take a photo of or whatever it might be. So he is a great source of unity for us as well. But you can't replace, there's nothing that will ever replace the quality one-on-one time with us than all the time in the day with Joey. It's beautiful time with him, but we do need that time. And it's sad that, you know, some married couples will really struggle with that, and they really will put their children first, and the spouse kind of goes on the sideline, and they invest everything in the kids. Whereas we've been really clear from the start, you know, our love came first, and Joseph is the fruit of our love. You know, I'm 51% husband and 49% dad. You know, I love that little boy with all my heart, but she will always be my number one. And she needs to know I cherish her and prioritize her above all and any children I pray that we're blessed with. And also, I remember my dad would always say to me, "I love your mum the most." And some parents might think that that's nasty for children to hear that their mum and dad love each other more than they do their children. And of course, the love that a parent has for their child is incredible, and you can't explain it. But I actually grew up feeling so safe, knowing that mum and dad are madly in love with each other. That gives me a sense of peace, knowing that, well, if they love each other even more than they love me, that means they're not going anywhere. And that actually makes me feel secure and safe in my existence and place in this family. So it's actually the best thing, the greatest gift you can do for your children is to love your spouse more than you love them. As weird as that may sound, I think it's true.
No, it's absolutely true. And that foundation of security, as anyone who studied psychology would know, that like the first few years of a child's life are the most important, because that's the entire foundation of their security and their well-being. And so it's from that, that love that you can see that if that is secure, then they feel secure, then their insecurity is not going to cause emotional instability and things like that in the future. And where you could almost say that some mental health comes from is that sort of from the birth, from things that have been disrupted and misbalanced from that childhood, you see. So you can, as from a psychological point of view, you can really, see that. And we're actually over time. But I was just thinking it might be interesting just to quickly give a couple of minutes on boundaries, because we had a talk about this a couple of weeks ago. And I think, it was a really interesting topic, because obviously not just for ourselves, but safeguarding our very own environments, because sometimes we can become, as couples, enmeshed in each other. Our boundaries cross. For you guys, how do you maintain, as Simon, you were saying when you were dating, you had dating boundaries for dating. What are your boundaries in marriage? Just an outline, not to kind of go deeper into it because we don't have time, but just for you guys, how do you maintain your autonomy as individuals within the marriage, but also as one?
Do you mean more with each other or just in general boundaries within marriage?
I think in general, because that applies to both of you, like to the relationship.
So one thing, something that we discussed very, very early on in marriage is we would have the boundary of like what we would share outside of the home. Obviously, that vulnerability, to be really vulnerable with someone means that you can trust that what you're sharing is going to stay with that person and not be relayed to other people. And that the bond that you form with your spouse is so unique, and it's so I guess it's so sacred, and so I don't care if you have a best friend that you reveal all to, you can't share with them the intimacies of the sacredness of what you're sharing with your spouse, like there has to be reverence with that. And so obviously that is a boundary, like I trust that if I share something really personal and I'm vulnerable with Simon, he's not going to go and tell his best friend, like it's that trust has to be there. So that's definitely a boundary. And also the way we speak about each other is a boundary. So we look for ways, or we ensure that we do not put the other person down. Either,
to our families, to our friends,
but when we're with them or without them, so that's another boundary that we have that helps protect the dignity of the other and the bond as well that we share. Just trying to think of other boundaries.
Something as well that can be pretty important is within your marriage, being very intentional about how you're spending time with friends of the opposite sex.
Yeah.
So for me, like if I have a female friend, that I knew even from before I met Madeleine, for example, like I know some people will say, "Oh, well, she was my best friend before I met my girlfriend, and now we're married, and I've still got this best friend and it's like, well, you know what? That's not healthy. to be having a best friend of the opposite sex when you're married.
That you see regularly.
Yeah, that you're catching up with for coffee and one-on-one. That's, you know, all you might need is to be having a rough patch or rough week in your marriage, and you know your mind can start playing tricks on you with this other person,
or even just developing an unnecessary
emotional bond with them,
with someone who isn't your spouse. You know, that's never a place that you want to be.
Yeah. So yeah, just being real. I mean, and I think you've got to have the humility to admit that I don't care how holy you are or how good you think your marriage might be, how strong the love is. You just don't want to put yourself in that position where you're investing unnecessary time and information with someone of the opposite sex, because it might not even be you that could be tempted to start having feelings, but it might be them that could begin to start feeling for you, and then that just gets messy, right? So having healthy boundaries, possibly, you know, seeing that friend when you're with your spouse, certainly not going out one-on-one or sorry, I'm trying to be brief.
That's very important. I definitely agree in terms of, and they're really, really good boundaries, because you're protecting the exclusivity of marriage, because once you create an exclusive relationship with somebody else, it really takes away from the person that you're supposed to be actually exclusive with, you know. So but it's like such good questions, and it's been such a good discussion, and I think that thanks for being vulnerable. Thanks. And you know, we really, as viewers as well, but as just your brothers and sisters in Christ, really value the fact that as a married couple you come out and share that, and we really thank you for that. I'm sure many people say the same. Thank you everyone who has tuned in. You can catch the Fire Up Ministries if you want to support them on the Fire Up Ministries website. We'll put the link on our YouTube later when we finish. So if you guys want more information, want to be in contact with them about anything, feel free, because Maddie and Simon are great and really honest and down to earth people, and I really value them as my friends too. So thank you so much, everyone, and don't go away. July is going to be lit. We've gone from modern day theme to now scripture based. So we're going to be having Dr. Christine Wood next week from Tasmania. She's Director of Evangelization. She studied under the students of Scott Hahn, and she will be sharing, we'll be just having a discussion about introduction to the Old Testament. And so we're going to then go into introduction with the New Testament and continue on with some specific Bible books, biblical books. Just a little bit of insight for you guys at home who really don't know much about scripture and who want to know more and delve into it, and you can ask your nitty-gritty questions. So we'll see you next week. I just give Maddie and Simon a little round of applause there. I'm sure everyone is the same.
Thanks, Jamil.
Yeah, you're welcome, guys. All right, guys. Have a super blessed weekend ahead, and we'll see you next Thursday. We'll be so excited to have you back as we come together. Thanks again, everyone. Thanks for joining us. All right.